All right, one thing about Brock Purdy that became very apparent to me early in his time with the 49ers is that he can sure move. In fact, it didn't take me long to figure out after he took over in 2022 from Jimmy Garoppolo that his 10-yard split was elite. You want to see what Brock Purdy's 10-yard split was and how it compared to some of his peers. The spider chart, I think, visualizes it really well. Nothing about Brock Purdy is physically remarkable as far as his testing goes, except for that 10-yard split. That is 91st percentile amongst cornerbacks, a 1.55 10-yard split. That 10-yard split is normally equated to somebody with about a 4.5 40, but Brock Purdy ran a 4.8 40. But still, the first 10 yards of his 40 dash were much faster than you'd expect for somebody who ran a 4.8 40. But anyway, that also is what matters more, right? If you can burst away from the defense, it's going to be way more indicative of your escapability as a quarterback than running in 40 yards for a straight line. So when we saw that quickness from Brock Purdy, we started to talk about this 10-yard split. We started to talk about the new possibilities for the 49ers offense. And at a certain point, the national media became upset when Brock Purdy was in the MVP conversation. They didn't think that Brock Purdy could possibly be that fast because he was typecast into a game manager, pocket passing type of quarterback. They didn't want him to be a guy with plus athleticism. However, then the playoffs happened. There was a big run against the Green Bay Packers on a winning drive in the red zone from Brock Purdy. And then obviously all of the big runs against the Detroit Lions, which were huge. Purdy channeled Steve Young in the second half of the NFC Championship game to lead the 49ers back against Detroit. And at that point, it was undeniable. Brock Purdy is a plus running quarterback. You know, I would say that it was undeniable before then, but the entire country got to see it. And that's led to a different line of talk regarding Brock Purdy this offseason. And I have to say, the Pat McAfee show probably does better than any national media as far as fairly seeing both sides of the Brock Purdy equation. And they went down the 10-yard split line of questioning, something that I was very, very big on, obviously, toward the end of last season. Well, the Pat McAfee show took that when Brock Purdy was on yesterday and asked him about it. And hey, this is an interesting answer because Brock Purdy might have been joking, but maybe not. Maybe he does want Kyle Shanahan to hear this about installing more running plays just for him.
10-yard split as Christian McCaffrey. Okay? He plays on your team. Not sure if you know him. He's really athletic, so that means you're really athletic. And then in that Lions game, you just took over with the feet. Have you thought about throwing for 4,000 and rushing for 1,000 as well this season? Like, why we need to get out of the pocket a little bit more, don't you think?
Yep.
I mean, if it happens, it happens. Scramble drill, all that, I'm all for it. But hopefully Kyle's watching this and we can put in some zone read and have a couple more rounds.
Kyle's not watching this, but we'll certainly try to clip it and send it to the Niners people. I like the thought of Brock Purdy reading the end. Could you? Brock, you got a little wiggle too. We saw it in Detroit. You got a little wiggle. Basketball player or no?
Nah, just baseball.
What position? Pitcher?
Yeah, pitch and play third.
Did you have some nasty shit?
Corner.
I was controllable for sure, so I controlled the game.
So, like most NFL quarterbacks, you know, you ask them if they played baseball, they just, I don't want to say they assume they could have went professional as baseball players, but I think a lot of us just assume that they could. Could you have done the baseball route if you would have went that way, you think?
Yeah, I think, I mean, not to make a bold claim or anything, but, you know, I think I could have, you know, gone D1 and then make a run at it for the pros. But, you know, after my sophomore year in high school, I was like, all right, I'm playing football, so that's just how it went.
I like that. It's a bold claim. Who cares? It will never be proved.
Yeah, could have been.
We do it every day. You should see. I make bold claims all the time that would never be able to be proven. It's awesome.
First, let's talk about the baseball part of that. You know that Brock's dad, Sean Purdy, actually played in the San Francisco Giants organization, made it all the way up to AAA, but was teammates with guys like Rich Aurelia, Russ Ortiz, was basically one call away from joining Barry Bonds and the Giants back in the 1990s. So I know a lot of you are Giants fans from that era. I mean, how perfect is that Sean Purdy, Brock's dad, was a pitcher who played for the Giants organization, made it all the way up to AAA back when the AAA affiliate was in the Phoenix area. Sean Purdy also faced John Lynch I believe this was a college matchup because John Lynch was a baseball player. Lynch was with Stanford, and Sean Purdy played for the University of Miami. But we got to go back to that discussion about the 10-yard split. And we have to go to the start of this interview. This is remarkable, and this is something that of course, I have talked about before, but I think it's worth talking about again.
Why is that?
Well, I'm not sure if you know, but you have the same 10-yard split as Christian McAfee. Okay, he plays on your team. Not sure if you know him. He's really athletic, so that means you're really athletic. And then
You have the same 10-yard split as Christian McCaffrey. Here you go. Purdy at what, 155 with a 10-yard split. And like I said, 155 10-yard split generally correlates with a 4.5 40. Christian McCaffrey has got the 155 10-yard split. He ran a 4.48 40. So McCaffrey is faster over a longer stretch. With Brock Purdy, the burst is there, and then it looks like he gets a trailer hitched onto him after about 10 yards. But it doesn't really matter because of the quarterback position, escapability. It's more about movement than pure speed. And the 10-yard split measures movement more than pure speed. So that leads us to the discussion point from the McAfee show. More zone reads, more design runs, because we didn't really see design runs for Brock Purdy over the course of his first 2 years. There might have been a draw here or there. I can't even really remember if there was one. We did see scrambles. Now, there is a big myth, and this is one that I've addressed already on Twitter. I think I've talked about it on a previous show. A lot of people are trying to say that the 49ers are a run-first team, but that's also a tired stereotype. In the postseason, the 49ers called 109 pass plays and only 77 run plays. There were 14 Purdy scrambles as part of those 109 pass plays, but none of those scrambles were designed runs. That was just Purdy executing the run when the pocket broke down, when he didn't have options downfield or didn't see the options downfield. He decided to take off and run. Obviously, a lot of those plays were highly effective. We just saw the discussion about the NFC Championship game scrambles. But first things first is that the 49ers are decidedly a pass-first team now. You saw that in the playoffs. I don't care if they're down 17 to Detroit. They made that deficit up really quickly in the third quarter. And even if that deficit caused them to pass a little bit more, there's still way too big of a gap between the passes and the runs to credibly say that the 49ers are a run-first team. These guys like the pass. Brock Purdy has spearheaded that shift. Teams also, I think, play the 49ers run out of respect to it. So the 49ers strive for balance, but with an elite quarterback, they have passed the football a lot. So that leads to the Brandon Ayuk discussion. I think the 49ers obviously want to continue building their team around Ayuk. That's why he's in line to get a contract extension from them. That leads to the offensive line discussion. It's even more reason to invest in pass protection. And it leads us back to changing the pace with Brock Purdy and maybe using his legs in a little bit more of a designed fashion. I'm not talking 5 zone reads a game. I'm talking maybe 1 or 2 every 3 or 4 weeks, especially when you can catch the defense off guard. Keep the defense honest. Remember when Kyle Shanahan drafted Trey Lance, he wanted to change the numbers of the opposing defense. He wanted to make sure that he's playing 11 on 10 because the defense was so worried about the quarterback running. Well, he wanted to make it a true 11 on 11 game. 11 on 10 is what happens when the QB can't run. When the QB is not a threat to run, well, the defense doesn't have to account for him and his legs. Shanahan wanted to make sure it was 11 on 11 and not 11 on 10. That's one of the main reasons why they drafted Trey Lance. They thought that he was faster than he actually was. It turns out that Brock Purdy is significantly faster than Trey Lance. The problem was Lance was running against FCS guys. Purdy, you could tell, was quick, but he didn't measure that well in the 40. It was the 10-yard split that measured a whole lot better. So you could say that he snuck up on people with his ability to move. But regardless of how we got here, Purdy is much more of an athlete than Lance was as far as his ability to move around the pocket and get out of the pocket. And that's left the 49ers with a really, really interesting set of options moving forward. Purdy's obviously a much better quarterback, throwing the football, processing the field than Trey Lance was for the 49ers, which is why he was the top-rated passer in football over the course of the past season. But the fact that he also has the ability to do this with his legs, as we saw in the NFC Championship game, may allow Kyle Shanahan to go back and add some of the wrinkles that he did envision adding back when it was Trey Lance who was supposed to be the 49ers quarterback. And we're talking just a few a year, enough to keep a defense honest. These do not have to be staples of game plans. But when you look at how seasons evolve, teams watch film, teams adapt to film, adjustments are made, and then counter adjustments are needed. The 49ers, I think, would be very interested in adding another thought to defensive coordinators' brains as they have to prepare for the 49ers. And that could potentially be done with Brock Purdy's legs. You don't want to overexpose him. You don't want to overexpose any quarterback because of the injury risk, especially a guy who can carve up defenses with his arm like Brock Purdy. You'd rather keep him carving up defenses with his arm. But there are times when you can be almost assured that you're going to get him into the open field if defenses aren't expecting it on some of these read options. And then at that point, you have to trust somebody like Brock Purdy to know when to slide. Football is a sport where you're not going to be able to mitigate every single bit of risk. It is a contact sport. The quarterback on every single drop back, even if he's passing, can get hit. It's not like a running play is, I think, fundamentally more dangerous, especially if he is aware and he knows when to slide. But on a passing play, he could get blindsided like he did by Hassan Reddick in the NFC Championship game. So it's about finding ways to neutralize as much of the risk as possible, to factor in the risk reward, right? Realize that if you do have defenses on their heels, because they do think that your guy might take off at any time, maybe the pass rush will be a little less ferocious. And maybe that takes away some risk on the drop back for Brock Purdy. I do think it's an absolute possibility. And if we listen to more from Pat McAfee and Brock Purdy, we will hear that he's actually been working on his speed and agility this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, it's an evolution, just with your body in the NFL. I mean, there's obviously continue to work on my arm and just mobility with my body in itself, and maybe just get a little bit more agile with speed and all that. But physically, there's always going to be more room for improvement. And so that's where I'm attacking this offseason. And then just the playbook, like I said, man, it's something that you got to continue to study and work at and to get better with how Kyle sees the game, man. If you're on point with who's calling the plays and why he's calling them, then I feel like, our relationship can continue to grow, and then we can really be a dominant force in this league. So that's where I'm at. You can never get comfortable in this league. You'll get exposed real quick. And so it's always, find that chip on your shoulder and continue to push. So that's where I'm at.
That's where Brock Purdy's at. And I think the 49ers are very open to evolving this offense. I mean, we saw the evolution between year one and year two. And I think that one was really clear. Purdy got a lot better moving and rolling to his left. And the first step was to not roll to his left when it was unnecessary. Learn how to step up in the pocket, find guys downfield instead of bailing out of the pocket before it became an absolutely needed maneuver. But then when he did roll left, we saw it from week one in Pittsburgh. Purdy started hitting receivers. There were some nice throws rolling to his left, throws that he wasn't making in year one. So he addressed that weakness in twofold fashion. He stepped up in the pocket more, and he got better at the actual mechanics of throwing to the offside or throwing from the offside on the rollouts to that side. What are going to be the progressions that Brock Purdy makes in year 3, year 2.5? Faster processing time. He was already a good deep passer last year. Maybe he tries to refine that even more. Maybe try to have a few less passes, bat it down. But I do think that one way that you can keep a defense on its heels instead of on its toes is to maintain that rushing threat. And that's the key word right there, rushing threat. You don't have to run 20 times a game. You don't have to run 5 times a game to be a threat to run. It might only take a play every couple weeks to maintain that threat of running. And as long as that idea is in the defense's head, that's when stuff can open up on the back end. Because you have to understand the NFL is a game of inches. It's a very, very precise game. If you ever go and watch the 49ers in person, you could tell in person way more than on TV. They are carving up very, very tight windows to make some of these throws over the middle of the field. And if something is off just by a little bit, a touchdown or a big gain can turn into a pick six. So if you're trying to create space and it's just a matter of a few inches, you're going to do everything you can to be successful within reason, obviously. You're not going to run your quarterback into the ground. But if you can get a linebacker to freeze for an extra split second, that can create the couple inches of space you need to make a throw in a certain situation. Sometimes it can create a whole swath of space, and it could lead to a big play. So there's a reason that Kyle Shanahan was interested in adding a mobile quarterback when he spent all that capital to trade up for Trey Lance in 2021. And since there's a reason for that, there's definitely every reason to believe that the 49ers might try to glean some of those same advantages moving forward. I'm going to move this to a 49ers Q&A. Brian Smith thinks that Brock Purdy can put up Drew Brees numbers with a good offensive line. Now, I'll tell you, Brock Purdy put up better efficiency numbers than Drew Brees ever did this past season. He didn't put up bigger raw numbers. They didn't pass that much during the regular season. But the efficiency numbers for Brock Purdy were off the chart. That being said, you are correct in that the offensive line did not rank well for the 49ers. The offensive line ranked down in the 20s for this team. And Purdy was the only quarterback with positive efficiency metrics behind a below average pass protecting offensive line. So we can really stand to reason that if this offensive line improves, the sky is truly the limit for Brock Purdy. Mike wondering if 5,000 yards are incoming. That would be something. But again, look at the playoff division. 109 called passes, 77 called runs. And part of that pass total is the 14 Purdy scrambles, which were plays that were designed to be passes at the line of scrimmage. Kyle thinks that Purdy is going to win the MVP this year. On the McAfee show, they said, well, you threw for 4K. You're going to add 1K rushing, 4K, 1K next year. Eric Gomes wants a 1K QB and running back duo. That'd be crazy. I mean, I don't even know the raw rushing total for Brock Purdy this past season. Let's look. These are his passing numbers. I got to scroll down to get to his rushing numbers. He ran for 144 this past season. But in the playoffs, he ran for 74 over 3 games. So 74 over 3 games is 24.7 per game. So let's take that, multiply it by 17. That's a 420-yard pace. It's not bad over the regular season. So yeah, 1,000-yard rushing, that's probably out of the question. I don't think you see Brock Purdy running much more than he did in the postseason, probably a little bit less in the regular season. But I think 350 rushing yards, 400 rushing yards, that's absolutely possible for Brock Purdy. Let's see what the QB rushing yards leaderboard looked like last season. QB rushing yards 2023. Lamar Jackson at 821. Justin Fields, number 2 at 657. Jalen Hurts, number 3 at 605. Josh Allen, 524. Josh Dobbs, 421. Look at that. 49ers backup Josh Dobbs. Taysom Hill, that doesn't really count. Specialty weapon, 401. Patrick Mahomes, 389. Russell Wilson, 341. Trevor Lawrence, 339. I think Brock Purdy can be right in that cluster there. Trevor Lawrence, Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes. The playoff pace would have Purdy near 500, which would be like Josh Allen. I think that's too much. But I think reasonably we can expect Brock Purdy with a little bit more running to be in the 300s. He could be a top 10 rushing yard QB if the 49ers choose to make it that way, if they think that's going to be what's necessary for the next evolution of the offense. I should put this up on the screen. Sorry. Let's get this up here. That's not it. That's still from the McAfee show. I need to find the window, which I can put up there. Here it is. Give me 1 second. Okay, here you go. So there you see the leaderboard for rushing yards amongst quarterbacks last year. 821 for Jackson. But I think that this Lawrence, Wilson, Mahomes bubble, that could be something that really works out for Brock Purdy this next season. All right, more questions. I'm ready for them. So we had somebody earlier, unfortunately, say it was too late for Germany. They said, I'll watch the show tomorrow. But we've got somebody from Germany here that's still watching. I think Germany is a good 7 hours ahead. So awesome. Watching at 1 a.m. I love it. I guess Shanahan found his Josh Allen and Purdy. Greetings from Germany. You could say so. I don't think that. I mean, Josh Allen is so physically imposing. Purdy's obviously not as physically imposing, but Brock can make all the throws and he could run. That 10-yard split might be faster than Josh Allen's. I don't know what Josh Allen's is, but I mean, Purdy's over 90th percentile. There are very few quarterbacks who have scored a faster 10-yard split than Brock Purdy. You think that special teams will be better after all the signings this offseason? Yeah, and another signing yesterday, they brought back Trent Taylor. That raises the floor of the special teams unit. I absolutely would not trade Brandon Ayuk to the Packers for Tucker Kraft and 2 random picks. We kidding right now? The 49ers are trying to win a Super Bowl, guys. Brandon Ayuk is one of the best receivers in football. Why would you trade him for 3 randoms? Like, seriously, I think they had something close to there were rumors, and I don't know which ones to believe from 2022. I don't know which ones to believe now, so I don't believe any of them. But there was potentially something on the table for Deebo Samuel that was much more valuable than this. And the 49ers didn't do it in 2022 because they were in the same boat as they are now. They want to win. They want to win a title. They don't want to get worse. Tucker Kraft and picks 41 and 58. There's nothing close to a guarantee that those would make you a better team if you didn't have Brandon Ayuk, right? The NFL is a league of players if you want to win championships. This is a league. There's a lot of guys, and it filters through a lot of dudes on a year in, year out basis that fill out margins of rosters. But you want dudes. You want guys that move the needle, the stars. Those are the guys that help you win titles. And Brandon Ayuk is one of those players, which is why he's going to earn some money this offseason. Got a hello from Japan. I love it. What time is it out there? It's probably like 2 days away from now, right? I was supposed to go to Japan earlier this month. We had to call off that trip. So we're going to hopefully make it work at some point soon. You love the idea of McAfee returning kickoffs. I do remember all the great returns he had at Stanford. He had some punt returns as well. But the kick return rules are different now. They will be very different. They're going to be more like plays from scrimmage, which is even more reason to think about Christian McCaffrey in that regard. McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel, I think, would be the best players there. Thank you, Rick. I appreciate you. I see Rick in the comment section quite a bit. I think Rick is in Chicago. He always says he's in Chicago. No, Purdy didn't sound like Ayuk was leaving on McAfee. I don't know. Is there people talking about that? I mean, Purdy gave his answers about as QB sanitized as they could be. I mean, he cracked a couple grins, joked that Kyle should add some read option to the playbook. Maybe he wasn't fully joking, but he's media trained. Brock Purdy is. He's not going to divulge major roster news. Plus, it's like the 49ers have already talked about this so many times, and reputable sources and reporters on this issue have all said the same thing. And I've talked to John Lynch and Jed York and Kyle Shanahan. Everybody's on the same page here. They want to get Brandon Ayuk paid and they want to move on. Everybody's also on the same page in that anything could happen at any time in the NFL, so you can't rule anything out. But we can assign probabilities to different courses of action, and we could also look at the 49ers motivations. We could look at how damn good Brandon Ayuk was last year, and we could say they want to keep this guy, and they probably will based on all of the information. So there's no reason to start staring at different quotes from Brock Purdy and try to convince yourself that they mean something when they obviously don't, just because the way he might have phrased something or the way that he twitched his lip. There's no reason to be zoomed in on that when you've got a whole treasure trove of information that is way more direct, that's leading you to the other truth. There's no reason to bury yourself in a conspiracy theory when you've got everything pointing in an obvious direction. Occam's razor is what I like to say. Drafting offensive line is important to protect Brock Purdy. It's important. I can't tell you what's most important. I mean, a football team's got to replenish every single season at almost every position. These guys go in and out, right? Like the 49ers only have a couple players left from the 2019 team. Kyle Juszczyk and George Kittle, Nick Bosa, Deebo Samuel. Like you have a very small handful of guys that are holdovers. Just goes to show you that you constantly have to be pumping new talent in, and all talent supports the quarterback. The offensive line might directly be blocking for him, but it's about release time. It's about separation from the receivers if the quarterback is not going to take as many hits. So it's not just offensive line. You've got to focus on making the whole unit as good as possible. They can trade up to grab Troy Fautanu. I've released a mock draft where the 49ers do that, where I execute a trade up to show how that might work. I think you'd have to go up to, I believe I had him trade up to around number 18. I think the Rams have 19, and the Rams have been trying to stockpile an offensive lineman, so you might have to trade up above the Rams. The Bengals have pick 18, so that's a team you might have to trade with. The Bengals have two big veteran tackles now, including Trent Brown, former 49er, so they might not be as interested in grabbing another offensive lineman. The Rams, meanwhile, they signed guards, so I wouldn't be surprised if they're dead set on packing that O-line room, somebody as versatile as Troy Fautanu who can help him out at tackle, help him out as a sixth man, whatever they need. I would not put it past them. And I believe they're at 19. I don't think I'm getting a really hard read on the 49ers right now. Trade up or trade back. Based on the visits that we've seen so far, looks like they're scouting guys in the 20 to 50 range, which might suggest trade back. It might mean they just want more darts to throw up against the wall. They want to infuse this roster with as much youth as possible. But then you also have the whole offensive tackle argument, and it's hard to find a starting caliber offensive tackle the later you go in the draft, maybe more so than almost any other position. So if that's the case, and this is the year for the 49ers to get a tackle, and they like a guy, they can move up. And they can also justify that by saying we're consolidating draft picks because it's going to be hard to make the 53-man roster. There are so many different ways that this can go, and that is by design from the 49ers. They've tried to fill gaps through free agency. Yesterday, they filled another one of them, Trent Taylor, punt returner. Fill the gap, put the super glue in the gap, make sure you're not leaking there so you can go up and have option power when you enter the draft. Trade up, trade down, stay put, 10 picks. It's all good. The draft is like a game, right? You enter the game and you have plays that you can call, but you don't know which ones exactly you're going to call until you see how the game is flowing and what the defense is playing against you. You want to make sure that you enter the draft with as big of a playbook as possible so that you have options to react to whatever may come your way. But you're not going to call a play for the second quarter of the game coming up in 2 weeks, 2 weeks ahead of that game. It's as simple as that. So I don't know what's more likely or what's less likely right now. I do know that the 49ers have insulated themselves with the ability to have as many options as possible. All right, 30 minutes. That's what I was going for. Good little Brock Purdy show. That was fun. We'll talk to everybody soon.